Since the removal of petrol subsidy by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, Nigerians have been experiencing an untold level of hardship. This led to the request by the president for the Senate to grant the approval of $800 million additional loan facilities to be secured from the World Bank for the National Social Safety Net program. The upper legislative chamber approved Tinubu's request on Thursday after Okoyemi Bamidele, the Senate leader, moved a motion to that effect. In the request, which was read on the floor of the Senate chamber earlier, Tinubu said the loan would be used to scale up the National Social Safety Net program and cushion the effect of the removal of petrol subsidy. Tinubu said the federal government will transfer 8,000 naira monthly to 12 million poor and low-income households for 6 months. Towards the end of his administration, former President Muhammadu Buhari asked the National Assembly to approve the sum for the same purpose. However, Nigerians have frowned at the 70 billion naira set aside to support senators and reps of working conditions. Well, joining us on the show this morning to discuss the approval of the $800 million loan request by the president is Johnson Chukwu, Managing Director of the Cowrie Assets Management. Welcome to the morning show. Now,
thank you for having me. Good morning.
Thank you for being here. Now, I think what's really, and just following up from the last conversation that we had with the Senate Minority Leader, we're looking at the approval of the loan request, of course, that has raised concerns among Nigerians, particularly the allocation of that 70 billion naira that is supposed to support senators and representatives' working conditions. We're just talking to Honorable Simon, and he said, they need this money to, buy computers and buy chairs and, do certain things that they would need. I want to know what your opinion is about this allocation. Do you think that it aligns with the current economic climate that we have in Nigeria, and also the economic challenges and the need to prioritize the well-being of the general Nigerian population?
Thank you once again for having me. I will take it from the last segment of your statement, issue of priorities. And the basic thing about economic management is allocation of scarce resources. So what you are looking at, the person who will allocate scarce resources will prioritize what is his or her own preferences. So the allocation of 70 billion to the National Assembly is an indication of the priorities of those in leadership position. And that's the way I would look at it. The key thing we keep talking about, we want to fight poverty. The question I always ask is, how are we fighting poverty? Today we are talking about actually it's about 576 billion. If you look at 8,000 to 12 million households for 6 months. So you're talking about an allocation of 576 billion to 60 million people, because the calculation is that there are an average of 5 per of the household, 60 million people, and then you have an allocation of 70 billion to about 500 people.
Less than 200 actually.
Yeah, because in the first place, members of the National Assembly, the House of Rep has about 360 members. The Senate has about 109 or so members.
Oh, okay, that's right.
So if you sum up that, they are less than 500. They are just about 470 members in the National Assembly. You want to give them 70 billion, then you give to 60 million people 500 billion. So the issue is, it's all about the priorities of those who are allocating resources. I mean, even at household level, people decide how they want to spend their money based on their priorities. There are those who are spending it on airtime, there are those who are spending it on alcoholic drinks, there are those who are spending it on food, some are spending on their children's education. So it all depends on priorities of those who are leading that group or social group. So for me, it's not about whether it's the most appropriate allocation. It's about what are the priorities of our leaders. We run an economic and social system that prioritizes the interests of the bourgeois, of the extremely rich, of the ruling class. And that's obviously one of the reasons why we're not developing. If you compare us to a country like China and compare where we were maybe in the 1960s where China was, even in the 80s, and why is it that China has become the first country in the world to eradicate extreme poverty? It's priorities of leadership. Why is it Nigeria is a country that now has the home to the largest number of the extremely poor? Priority of leadership. It's not just because we have don't have enough resources. How are we deploying the resources? And that for me is the issue.
Okay, all right. I mean, I like. Thanks for breaking it down and setting the tone for the conversation. But let us try and situate. Let's locate this money, these resources, two levels of intervention so far. More than 6 weeks after the president came in and has removed fuel subsidy. First is the $800 million that I believe he inherited from President Muhammadu Buhari. I believe we're talking about just one $800 million.
Absolutely, it's $800 million,
which is a loan. It will have to be repaid back to the World Bank. The second level of the intervention for the palliative is the 500 billion that will at least go, hopefully, directly to the masses, the 12 million households, the 60 million people. Let's situate that money. It is not coming from the savings made from the fuel subsidy. It is from supplementary budget of 2022 that they are moving 819 billion, 500 billion for masses, and then all the other ones, 70 to National Assembly, 35 to NJC, and 19 to Agric, etc. It's coming as a supplementary budget from a budget that runs on deficit already, that we borrow to fund. What is the economic sense of these palliatives? Borrowing from World Bank that we have to repay back, and then taking 500 billion from last year's budget as a supplementary budget that now includes components that won't directly impact on the people, but rather on members of the judiciary, on the agri sector, which is understandable, and then National Assembly members, particularly the new ones. I mean, what is the economic sense in this palliative?
It makes sense.
Okay, let me try to marry two things. There is a supplementary budget of 819 billion.
Yes.
Which was passed under the Buhari government.
Yes.
With the National Assembly extended its life to December this year, which for me is a misnomer. Because you really shouldn't be running two budgets at the same time.
Absolutely.
The new budget, 2023 budget, have integrated whatever they had in the supplementary budget. But that's not the topic of our discussion. Let's look at the issue. The $800 million that the World Bank has granted to the to the federal government is going to fund that 819 billion. It's going to be part of the funding of 800. Yes, because in the first place, the 819 billion was supposed to be borrowed. The federal government does not have resources to fund from any source. If it had not been borrowed from the World Bank, partly borrowed from the World Bank, it would have been borrowed from the public or borrowed from the central bank. If you look at the fiscal condition of the federal government, federal government borrows virtually every kobo it spends. The current federal government revenue is at best enough to pay interest on existing debt. So every kobo that the government spends on infrastructure, on healthcare, on payment of salaries is borrowed. And that's it. But that's how bad our fiscal condition is. So the two things, they are not two things. They are not raising 500 billion and giving to the most vulnerable. They are borrowing $800 million, which translates, if you use the exchange rate of 750 naira, it translates about 600 billion naira. That is part of what they are using to fund their supplementary budget.
I see.
So in effect, what they will now need to borrow from local sources is just like 219 billion. So they are not two sources of funding because there was no funding for the supplementary budget. It was supposed to be borrowed. If you look at last year, by November, the government had borrowed more than 6.5 trillion naira. Okay, and then if you look at this year, the government had made a budget that it would borrow 12.1 trillion naira. And that is based on a crude price, a crude volume of about 1.6 million barrels. Last month, The best we did was 1.25 million barrels. We've not done, that was the best we've done this year. So we have a huge deficit, even based on the projected government revenue. In effect, this year, we're going to have a budget deficit of more than 12 trillion. Maybe it will be to some extent moderated by the removal of subsidy and the change in exchange rate. Of course, that will mean that government, part of the money, the government said they were spending about 18 billion naira every day, which translates about 6.5 trillion naira every year. So probably that will be partly saved. And then the fact that they're going to convert foreign exchange earnings at a higher naira rate will also help cushion the gap between government revenue and government expenditure. So in effect, even if they are going to be savings, the savings are not going to manifest in form of government treasuries growing. It will only manifest in form of the deficit, government deficit reducing.
So what about the extra money that the states are sharing, that they are now asking masses to say, go and ask your governors what they're using the money for?
No, it depends on the fiscal condition of the states. Some states that are very prudent will see their deficit narrow and then they will have surplus. It's all about the prudence of at the state level. The federal government, we're talking about the federal government. The federal government situation is so bad that the federal government will not have surplus. Again, you understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
It will not have surplus because its deficit is so huge. But for some states, they will have surplus. I'll give you an instance. A state, if you look at the fact that the government, what comes to the federation account,
yes,
will increase by about 600 based on the subsidy removal, will increase by about 6.5 trillion. So what that means is that
in the entire year,
the government currently share about 815 billion every month. On average, if you look at what they have shared in the past 12 months, they currently share about 815 billion.
That's right.
So you're going to see that increase by, at the minimum, 400 billion. So if you add 400 billion, you're talking about 1.2 trillion that's to be shared based on the removal of subsidy. Assuming that consumption volume they indicated with the use to calculate subsidy is correct. Then that automatically means that at the 3 tiers of government, allocation would increase by close to 50%.
Okay. When
you adjust for the exchange rate, you could see an allocation increase by 60%. So any state government that had the maintained prudence in its management of resources could have surplus. For instance, a state government that was getting 10 billion every month could now get 16 billion a month. So it's all about what it does with that extra 6 billion. So, but you could have a state government that, if you have a state government that's already borrowing 6 billion every month, then it simply means this money will go to cover the hole. And you will not see it in surplus. But assuming a state government, for instance, says, look, from this surplus or this increase in revenue allocation, we're going to increase salaries by 20%. Salaries in a good state shouldn't account for more than 20-30% of total state government revenue.
That's right.
So if you increase by 20%, you are still going to have a surplus, because it's only that salary that is recurrent in nature. The other overhead of the state can increase marginally 2-3-5%. But and that, I'm one of those who are advocating that we should have citizens activism.
Okay.
Citizens should ask their state governors, what exactly are you earning? And unfortunately, under the immediate past government, they stopped publishing the monthly allocation that was instituted under Obasanjo's government.
Yes.
And that, for me, is concealment of critical information, important information. So this current government must make sure that publication is done monthly, so that people can take it up and say, His Excellency, prior to now, you were getting 10 billion, now you're getting 16 billion. Where is it going to?
Okay, I want us to talk about, the debt deficit, and of course, even trust. Now, as a financial expert yourself, now we're looking at, just give me 1 second here. Okay, let's start with the trust deficit now. Transparency and accountability are essential when it comes to the utilization of loans and public funds. We know that. Now, I want to ask you, what mechanisms should this current administration put in place to ensure that this $800 million loan is utilized effectively for the intended purpose of supporting the National Social Safety Net Program? How can this current administration demonstrate transparency? And you've spoken about even how they stopped putting out the monthly publication. So, like providing regular updates and the progress of the impact on this program. And also talk about the increasing debt burden that we have in Nigeria and how it may even impact future generations. As a financial expert yourself, how do you assess Nigeria's ability to manage its debt when we look at it on the for long-term economic stability, and what steps should be taken to strike a balance between addressing the immediate social needs of its citizens and the country's financial stability, especially when we look at it on a global scale?
Okay, let's start from the issue of transparency around the disbursement of the 8,000 naira to 12 million households. What we should expect is that we should ask for this register. The register should be uploaded to a website where everybody should have access to. Then we, because there are 12 million, it may be difficult. Yes, it may be difficult to publish it in the newspapers. But if you upload it where any of us can access it, it should be broken down into states, local government, districts. So if we are saying that Steve Ayoride has collected 8,000, we should know whether Steve lives in Ikeja or VI. So the people within that axis will actually go, okay, Steve, we heard you collected, you come and buy me Coke. So that Steve will now say, look, I didn't see any money. Or he said, yes, really I collected.
Urgent 2K from the 8K.
Yes. So that should be the starting point in terms of transparency. Yeah. But there's a larger issue when it comes to this issue of 8,000. You want to give 8,000. I'm not saying it's not right to give. I'm just saying it's not fundamental. It doesn't address the core problem of poverty. It's what you call palliative. It's ephemeral. It's not enduring, and it doesn't have a lasting impact. If you are saying each of these households, you get them 8,000 per month, that means in 6 months, you give a household of 5 persons 48,000 naira. If you live in Aja and you come to work in VI, the transportation cost from Aja to VI and going back will take you about 70,000 naira a month. That is 22 working days. So if you are considered in that poverty register, whatever they call them, social register, and you get 48,000, it simply means that it's not enough for you to pay for public transport to and from work for the whole month. But if you extend it further, what you are saying is that each of the household members will get 9,600 naira for the 6 months. So each person gets 9,600 naira for the 6 months. We translate to 1,600 naira per month. How much, Senator, who can live, even an infant that is a suckling, that can live on 1,600 naira a month? So that's why I said it's so inconsequential that the people who are going to get it will not get the impact. The core problem should be, is our economy productive? And we should go and look at what other countries have done to win their people out of poverty. Vietnam is already almost achieving that. China has achieved it. Thailand is achieving it. And I'm talking of countries who have the same kind of demography, the same kind of poverty level that we used to have, that used to have the same kind of poverty level with us. Palliatives, handouts, have never weaned any country out of poverty. We must evolve an economic structure that is productive, that you and I can go and get jobs and earn income. And we are productive enough that when inflation goes up, the company we work for will increase our salary to compensate for the increase in inflation. When we are productive, the key thing is we are running an economic system that is largely unproductive, that is based on allocation. And that's why our poverty level keep increasing. So we must address the core of that issue.
Absolutely.
That takes us to the second question about how do we make sure we have a sustainable debt policy. The federal government debt today, if you adjust for exchange rate, we should be in the region of 35% of the GDP.
That's high.
But that's not the greatest concern. The greatest concern is debt service to GDP. By the end of November last year, federal government total revenue, total revenue was 6.5 trillion naira. Debt service, January to November last year, federal government, 5.4 trillion naira. Do the maths, 80%. And that would have escalated because we borrowed further.
That's true. And we're still borrowing.
So we are at the point where debt service, like I said, almost every kobo that the government spends is borrowed, other than what we earn is basically used to pay interest.
All right.
So the key thing is that goes back to productivity.
Yeah.
We need to grow the economy.
Yeah.
If we're a productive economy, we will grow our GDP from $430 billion to $1 trillion. If we do that, our current debt to GDP will drop to 17.5%. Debt service will also shrink. Because you can only tax the net revenue, you can only tax productive activities.
That's right.
And because we have not addressed those heavily, I'm happy that we've taken out the issue of subsidy of petrol, we have harmonized the exchange. But the other key thing we need to do to make this economy productive, and that's what will save us from a debt crisis.
Mr. Chukwu, we really have to go, but please, just 10 or 20 seconds. I really must ask this, Shaitan. And two things. Why is Kano State government being reported to be against the large chunk of the 500 billion palliative coming to Lagos? Do we have an understanding of how that distribution will be done? That's one. And two, will there be an incentive for government to want the exchange rate to ever improve if they are making more money from the dollar, at almost 800 naira now, pounds at 1,000? Which pays the government what you are getting 400 for is now about 700 and 800. But then for the citizens and manufacturers and those who need to source dollars, it is killing.
Okay, quickly, you said I have 10 seconds.
Yes.
The decision or objection by Kano State government is in the realm of politics. And I'm not a political expert. One of the things I can also only say is that we need a transparent register, which shows the distribution across states, across local governments. Once we have that, and people can validate the names in those registers, they are genuine human beings. Yeah. That's what matters. Okay. The other aspect of it is that, remember that anytime your currency depreciates, the standard of living of your country deteriorates. Citizens deteriorates. Yeah. So if they depreciate, when we're talking of palliative, when we're talking of salary increments, because currency are depreciated or devalued. So it has impact on inflation, which affects your cost of living. So the primary purpose of the government is to improve the well-being of your citizens. A very, very weak currency will deteriorate the standard of living of your citizens. So that should be the overriding purpose of a government, to improve living standard. And it is not just enough that the government has so much revenue, which is that the government cannot tax you to the point of debt. It can as well tax all of us and collect all the money. But the key thing is that if your currency keep devaluing, the standard of living of your city will keep deteriorating, and their demand for social handouts will continue to increase. And if you're not careful, it could lead to social unrest.
Thank you so much, Mr. Johnson Chukwu, Managing Director, Cowrie Asset Management. Very insightful interview this morning on The Morning Show.